Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here of the Lonely Risk Podcast. I am your host, as always, Blake Ray. And today's guest is an interesting and a first for us. He does not own a watch brand, technically, but he is changing how people discover watches. Sitting down with us today is the CEO of WatchGang, Chad Tsagris, the company that turned watch collecting into an experience and disrupted the very traditional industry with a bold subscription model. Today, we're going to be talking about what it takes to really build a business, especially trust in the watch community, where customers don't choose what they buy, not always, but also, we're going to talk about what's next for WatchGang. So, fasten your seatbelt. This is going to be another great episode. And please welcome the CEO of WatchGang, Chad Tsagris. Hey, brother.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me on here.
I'm super glad to have you on. You're also a podcaster, too. I just learned this as well, right?
I've done a few podcasts. We're gonna maybe in the next year we might launch a Watch Gang podcast, but it would be everything but watches is kind of what I'm kind of going for with watch people because we all have hobbies that we like to talk about.
Yeah. Well, if you're looking for a co-host, I
Yeah,
would
there you go.
like to throw my name in the hat. That'd be freaking awesome. So, um, but no, we met in Austin, and I've been a fan of what you guys have been doing for a really long time. I've been a customer of WatchGang since the early days, and you guys are really doing something really special. So, curious as to you started with the company in 2016, like how you got involved, and then now I guess you've taken over in 2024 is what I read, right?
So 24, I stepped into being the interim CEO. But then in March of 2025, myself and a group of investors from Switzerland, because hey, if you're going to sell watches, the Swiss are always great, purchased the company from the former owners and really were restructuring it to in my vision as a passionate collector myself. I started with the company back in 2016. So I was with it pretty much from ground up. Originally, I was one of their first vendors to fulfill watches in their subscription, as I was a very vintage collector, and I started in 2015 bringing in independent brands like Terracello Mar, out of water watches, Laco watches into the United States, and basically WatchGang was ordering hundreds and hundreds of watches from me every month, and I'm going, whoa, what's going on here? So they asked me to come out to LA, offered me a job, and I was kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna go for a ride, see what it's like living in LA, and see what they're doing differently. Because as a distributor, as someone repping brands, there was no one hitting the volumes that they were hitting on independent and new up and coming brands.
And yeah, I mean it's crazy. I just being in the Facebook group just to see the activity. Um, yeah, I mean it seems like you guys have a huge subscription base, and then my favorite part of the business model is the wheel. I think I've talked to you about that. It's a fun way to buy a watch. Like, and somebody from the club was like, "Oh, like." Because I had mentioned, that you live here, in Vegas, and that you might be coming to some of the watch club meetups. And they was like, "Oh, I'm gonna talk." I was like, first of all, like, let me talk about the rules of the wheel, because he had got something he didn't expect, and I'm like, dude, you don't put shit on your wheel that you don't expect. And anyways, but yeah, I mean, it seems like now you guys have. I mean, you guys have tiered up. I mean, you guys, I think when I first like started paying attention to WatchGang, you guys had like a 250 a month or like a $300 a month subscription or something like that. And now you guys have like the Centarium, which is like, I mean, freaking insane.
That last month, actually, in November, we did a $12,000 mystery box. I basically go to the manufacturers and I go find deals, and I want to pass on my savings and my way of doing business to people who are passionate collectors in that mystery way. I try to give some clues of what the people are going to be getting in those high end things. But, even I did, I think it was like during Black Friday, we did a $17,000 box, and it came with a watch set of 3 watches that I curated for those members who purchased it. And let me tell you, there's some pretty good watches in there. I think one of them was Zenith Chronomaster with the
Oh
Panda.
yeah.
So, I can't really be upset about that. There's a bit of an Omega in there, Grand Seiko. It's a pretty dope collection. I would have rocked them all. So that's what I feel is really the important thing.
Do you feel like now, since when you started with the company to now, it sounds like the vision has totally shaped and changed directions? Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. That's 100%. When they originally started, it was a $29 box, and you got a watch, and then one person randomly in the month would get a Rolex. Now we give away a Rolex every single week, and we give away a tag on Tuesdays to our members. The basic membership now is around $79, and it goes up to $400. This is a fun thing to, it's where you can come in, explore, discover what you like. And there's so many people I talk to all over the world that are learning about what they want through WatchGang and getting into the collecting hobby. And it's an affordable price point with some good value in these watches that we're curating for people. But then they kind of pass through, and everyone goes down like from where they start collecting to where they finish collecting. And I don't want people to purchase things they necessarily don't want and spend a lot of money. So I think that the subscription offers people a chance to discover without spending a lot of money.
Yeah, and something too that I've always thought about is like, obviously the wheel, right? I'm a huge fan of the wheel. I love to buy watches from the wheel. And obviously I just purchased 2 watches from you guys like last week or so for gifts for Christmas. Obviously, like when you think about high-end Swiss brands, like they don't want to be associated with like discounts or like things of that nature. So like I'm assuming, are you guys just buying the watches outright, or like are you like saying, hey, cool, like we want to have you on our wheel, like, or are some of these brands even learning that they're on the wheel? Like how does that even work?
So most of the brands know that they're on the wheel. Some of the grails that we have up there, I purchase at full retail. When you see a Rolex on level 5 on the wheel, I'm going and buying that Rolex. And throughout the wheel, it's an interesting thing because you don't necessarily are buying a discount. You're purchasing the spin level. And it's basically, you can spin anywhere from $99 all the way up to, we've had a $10,000 wheel. This weekend alone, we're going to have a wheel that's $1,500 to $5,000. And those watches are fair market price. They're not discounted or they're at full retail. But the benefit is you could spin that wheel and you could end up walking away with a Daytona. And I had a guy 2 years ago. He spun the wheel for the first time ever for $1,500, and he won a Panda Daytona. He never spun again. Never.
Lucky.
I'm like, congratulations, man.
It's like, did you buy a lottery ticket that week too? Like, what's up? Like,
I actually called him to explain, like, you realize like you won like a car in the value of that watch. Like, I'm like, congrats, man. I hope you enjoy it. Even last month, we gave away a Sprite on the wheel. So every time you spun the wheel, you gained entries to a Sprite. And we had a customer, and she purchased watches around $100 to $300, and she won a Sprite. And I went out to Denver to meet her and deliver the watch because I want to be involved in our community and seeing how the reaction of these people are. And I'm like, this is like a life-changing experience, and I'm happy that she got to do it on WatchGang and the wheel.
How I'm curious too about like the monthly reoccurring subscriptions too. Like, how do you guys determine like what ships out, like who's getting what? Like, is there a science to it, or is it just let's just grab a watch off the shelf that fits within this little area?
So it's a whole year to 2 year long process of curating the watches that are going to be in subscription. We have to go to the brands to basically select the watches that are good enough for us, and then they will also make sure the quality is representative to them. Then how it gets curated is it's an algorithm. So basically, we have our head of development, Alex, who built this incredible algorithm in the back of WatchGang in our admin that basically goes through and selects color, size, and making sure people don't get duplicate brands, duplicate styles, to curate a watch collection for them and allow them to go through a journey. And this will be the evolution in the coming year, is to put people through a journey of collecting. So when they've been a WatchGang member for 6 months or 7 months, that they can look at their watch box and they can be like, all right, I got a pilot, I got a field watch, a dive watch, I have a dress watch, I have something a little more avant-garde and a little crazy. Okay, now what do I want to actually invest into a real timepiece, into going into the Swiss world or into the luxury world?
And what about getting some of those independents? Because you guys have a ton of great independents on there. Like, do you get any resistance at all from some of these independents? Kind of saying, hey, you have a totally different business model to selling watches than anybody else. So like, do you get any hesitancy or like pushback from these independents saying, hey, like we don't really see our products on your website in a subscription based platform, or like, have you guys just totally transcended any of that resistance at this point?
I think that our volumes help break that barrier, because there's not many retailers that kind of call you up and go, "Can I order 301 SKU?"
Yeah.
That kind of helps. I think that really it's been that we've been a staple of a place where it allows independents to also sell without going on to other platforms that are discounting heavily or that are open to the public. So when people Google their brands, that they would see 35% off this brand. That really kills a brand. The subscription is a place where people can come in, it goes right to people's wrists without ever having an online listing. So it's a tool for a lot of those independents. It also, the best way to sell watches in this world is to have watches on people's wrists. You want people showing the watch, telling their friends, and we're able to get a lot of watches on a lot of wrists very quickly. So it's a benefit to them, I think.
And then in terms of like education, like, I as a journalist now, like, I go to Wind Up or I go to any of these watch shows and I learn about a million freaking different brands. And it's just so hard for me to keep up with. So like at this point now, are you still in that exploration phase where you're still always on the prowl to try and find new brands? Or like, are you just kind of sitting back now and just saying like, yeah, cool, this brand works, this brand works, this brand, like,
I love testing new brands. I came to WatchGang as a passionate watch collector and looking for something young, creative, and that's a lot of fun. So for me, I'm always on the hunt for new brands to test, whether it be on our store, a full retail with like basically traditional retail experience, whether it be on the wheels or put into the subscription boxes. It's just as fun for me to discover new brands to bring them to our audience as it is for our audience to accept those brands, right?
yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's always exciting when you learn about a new brand and it feels like this new tickling sensation inside, and it never gets old. Um, let's take a step back too, because you had mentioned that you started off, in the early days of WatchGang, and now, you talked about taking over with Swiss leadership. Like, what is your vision for the future of WatchGang? And how have you made steps to get there?
So I view WatchGang as it needs to be a place for people to come, learn, explore, and have fun. So the vision of my WatchGang in the next 2 years is a full gamified and educational experience for people to come and enjoy the hobby of collecting watches. The wheel's only one game that we have, and we want to make 7 or 8 other games, and even some games that are just free and educational, so people can basically play in the hobby of watch collecting.
I mean, that sounds amazing. I can't wait to see what else you guys come out with. Um, obviously, from a collector and from being in the community, a lot of the, I guess, past experience that I've heard and past feedback is, it seems like you have customers that stick around and some of them that like just try it out for a couple months and then kind of like just be like, okay, cool, this isn't for me. So like what's been the secret to kind of keeping, those members engaged? Is it just the excitement of the giveaways and kind of the randomness, or
I think it's a mixture of both. I have members who've been in WatchGang for 5 to 7 years, and they enjoy it. I think it's what I look at about how to keep a member around or what to do is I want to basically bring them to the next level they're collecting. In the past, WatchGang stopped most of our pricing at around $500. And if you're a watch collector, that's not a big budget for getting into some of the higher end timepieces. So I want to give them a journey that they can kind of go, okay, this is what I like, and now I'm ready to step up to buy a ball, an Oris, a Laco, whatever that next level is. And then when they're at the next level above that, also give them offerings and deal and value and lots of games to get those higher end watches too.
and you guys, it seems like you guys are watching that customer kind of evolution in real time, where you have somebody that starts off at, maybe a $100 or $200 timepiece, and then they go into a 500,000 and even further. Like, I mean, that is a crazy kind of to watch in real time. And I'm assuming you guys are seeing that every day.
Every day. And it's actually funny. The reason I even discovered WatchGang myself, because I was pre-WatchGang, I was mostly a vintage dealer in Philadelphia, buying and selling Rolexes and all that. And then I started to get in 2015 into independent brands and representing them. And a guy who came to buy a Rolex off me was like, hey, I'm in this watch club called WatchGang. You should check it out. And he was beyond WatchGang at that point, and he was going into collecting Rolexes. And that's really what I want all my customers to do, is go through that scale to get what they want, because we all have a grail watch, and our grail kind of changes in our collecting journey, I think, for all of us. And that's where WatchGang can be, if you're into watches and you don't have a huge budget and you're just learning, or if you're buying one of our $12,000 mystery boxes, we got something for everyone there.
Yeah, something too that I'm curious, maybe you can give some insight into is, if you look at our past trajectory for all of our podcasts, we've had probably at least like 50 or 60 different watch brands on, so like for you at WatchGang, how do you decide what brands, and watches are going to make it into the boxes, and what do you look for in terms of, hey, this is a brand that we feel comfortable enough to stand behind, to sell, and to distribute their products?
So that's it's like a two-part question, really. The brand has to have a pure history and be sold outside of WatchGang and their own website. That's kind of one of the first things that we look for in a brand. It has to be that someone will be accepting of it and happy to receive it. And the quality, and this is something we learned a lot from day one until now, is quality control and making sure that the products are exactly what they say. Because that was one of our hardest challenges in the beginning, was getting the right quality of product to customers. But also, it is a business. We have to make margin. We have expenses, but we have to make sure we're getting that right quality of product. Then second is, if I don't like it, probably not going to be in one of the mystery boxes. I got pretty good taste when it comes to watches. I've designed a few watches myself with different brands, and it comes to me and my team. We look at it, and if it's something that's just not pretty for everyone, it's not going to be in a box.
I mean, that's a pretty interesting assessment too. Curious to get your perspective as well, because you talked about the early days of WatchGang, how you were just essentially like a dealer, WatchGang, to Matthew and the previous team. And now you're kind of going into a whole different approach. I'm assuming that you're sitting there with like, doing like inventory management and like assessing like risk and stock and like, still trying to keep up with that, hey, surprise and excitement aspects of it. So like, how do you approach those things differently from, just literally, I mean, it sounds like it kind of transferred over from, you buying and selling vintage watches. Is that accurate too?
No, yeah. I was, for 10 years before WatchGang, I was buying and selling vintage watches. And I started selling and buying vintage watches because I was always trying to level up my own collection. And then after a while, I was like, hey, this could actually be a job. When WatchGang started, like I had a few brands, and they called me on like a Friday and they're like, hey, next Wednesday, could you any chance have 300 Swiss automatics? They didn't even care what they were, just 300 Swiss automatics, $200. And I didn't have the watches. And I said, sure. And then as soon as I hung up that call, I went, oh, what did I say yes to? So I called a friend of mine, Jerome, who owns a company called West End Watches. And I had him overnight 300 Swiss day dates to me. I didn't even know how they were going to pay me, actually. And I called my dad to come over and help me pack them in my living room and drove them to UPS. And I was like, well, why did I do that? And that was really the roots of the start of WatchGang. Now, look, my brother's our COO. He has a million softwares and warehousing and reports and this and this and this. My job is still the fun job where I kind of go out and hunt for deals and some opportunities that we can get into the subscription. And I get to work one-on-one with a lot of the brand owners. And, we look for different opportunities in places where we can give our membership, a lot of cool stuff.
Something that I ask every CEO on my my podcast is like how they measure success outside of like the financial aspects of it. Like, is it growth? Is it, customer satisfaction? Like, how is it that you, Chad, measure success?
I think that, it's always financial. For me, it's customer happiness and seeing when there's stuff I curated or picked that it goes over really well with the community and the audience. That's what I find where I can find more successes, because I watch that stuff daily, all day, what people are buying, what they're interested in. And yeah, sometimes we make some wrong picks here and there along the way, but I think it's about the customer and our community is really, if they're happy and satisfied with our services and enjoying the games and fun things that we have at WatchGang, that means that we're getting in the right direction.
Something too that, like, I guess as a customer, I have no idea how I even heard about WatchGang, which is terrible to say publicly, at least to you now that I know you. And then just kind of once you get into the door, you realize there is a community behind it. And I think, obviously when I first started, like I told you, I've just been a wheel guy. I think it's just an interesting way to buy a watch. It's fun. It's exciting. It gives you an experience that you're not going to get anywhere else, because, if you think about how you buy a watch, or at least I've bought a watch, maybe I'm sure other collectors are the same, but you spend months obsessing over a certain watch, right? And then then you go and try it on if it's available to try on. And then, and then you're like, okay, cool. I kind of like this. You take a picture and then you go back and look at the picture over and over and over. And, so that's at least what I've done. But now, I just know, hey, this is a great watch. This is cool. Like, I'd buy it for X dollars, right? You put a value on it and then hopefully you get it. But like, I think when I realized and I learned very early how to use the wheel, kind of like alluding to what my friend was saying from the watch club, like, you learn very quickly how to play the game for one, and how to load the wheel up. And then, when I didn't know, like, I think that was when I discovered the community behind it. Cause I was like, hey, like, I got this watch I didn't want. And then I reached out to support, and support was like, oh, well, you could go to the Facebook community and, trade it or whatever, and then I learned about the entire community. So like, and from my understanding, also from my research, that was your idea, I think, wasn't it? To get kind of like create this community, um, to help kind of put that in place, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, it was a group idea that we wanted people to have a place where they could go interact with each other. In years past, it used to be called the WatchGang Exchange on Facebook. We actually let the moderators take it over completely, so that our company can run outside that community. And the community can be independent with us, without our hands kind of picking into what people are saying and doing in that community. I think that really every hobby has a community, and when you find your tribe or your group of people that are into the same thing as you, it's a really cool idea. One thing next year, and this is something that we're kind of toying with right now, is I really believe to bring our community to the next level is to bring it offline. I think that even if it's just like meetups across the country where we have like a pub night and grab a beer, I think it's just something where we can show that we're humans that are very passionate about this to our people, and that they can enjoy it with us, because that's really what we want.
I agree. I agree. I mean, obviously, like you and I have talked, about building a community, right? Like at least here, like locally, like there's not a huge watch community in Vegas for some reason, which is kind of weird. But the second that I learned that you also lived here, I was like super excited. I was like, this is somebody that really understands like what we're trying to do, like in the watch community. We're trying to create, a passionate enthusiast group. Um and so I can't even tell you like how exciting that was just to learn that you're here in Vegas, which is freaking amazing. And you're somebody that gets it, that gets like what it's like to build a community, what it's like to manage a community, and how to successfully kind of grow a community. Cause that's something that's like totally foreign to me. I have my podcast, I have my listeners, I have the people that, read my articles online and stuff like that. But like I've never really been able to successfully kind of harness them, right, and keep them active and engaged, necessarily, because that's always the challenge, right? Um so I'm curious as to like, and it sounds like that's going to be next year. Is that, are you going to try like WatchGang events? Are you going to try festivals? Like what is
Uh,
it, if you can tell us?
whatever it's going to be, it's going to be fun. I really am the opinion that we have to do more than just go up to an event and show off our watches. You have to be engaging with those people, and doing something that's fun, right? I'm not. We talked about a festival or an event or some type of like basically. Eventually, I'd like to build like WatchGang bars across the country that people can kind of come in, which is a different retail experience too, right? I'm a big proponent in thinking, what is the retail experience from a customer? I think buying just because it's the lowest price on Chrono 24 or this or that, or you're finding the deal, you're gonna find a deal anywhere. Everyone's chasing a deal, right? But I think you need to give a customer a lot more of an experience, and that's what the wheel's been really great with us. Is okay, here's a good deal, but it's also an experience that you can enjoy something. So whatever type of event we'll have in the future will be a fun event. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. No, I can't wait to hopefully be involved, I was thinking that would be like just an amazing experience, to have something, we talked about it. We'll talk more later about that, like what we can do for Vegas.
Oh,
Um I'm curious as to like, obviously there's more than what meets the surface, right? You are not only distributing watches, you're selling watches, you're importing watches, you're, the first and last person to serve the customer. Um, I'm sure you're on literally the front of all the trends. Like, what are you starting to see right now in the retail watch segment that like nobody's talking about?
So, I think a lot of the craft brands and the micro brands were really performing super well. I see that the big ones kind of learned a lesson from it, and they're coming back. And I see that in the numbers. So when you're talking about Swash Group brands and Seiko and all these like old established names, they've learned what those young independent brands are doing, and they're kind of mimicking it a little bit, and they're getting numbers back up because that's one of the really big things. As for style, dress watches are in this year. If you're talking about like Cartier styles or integrated bracelets, it's like that's what people are going for. A little too much. I've seen about 100 people try to replicate a crash. Well, look, if you're fortunate enough to ever own a crash in your life, congratulations to you. It's one of the most amazing designs and best watches. And I think it should be left to those special few who actually can afford the real one, in my opinion. Like,
I agree. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple brands that I think now have done their own versions of the crash too. But yeah, I'm also starting to see it kind of like this. The case sizes are slowly going down as well, and we were talking about that. Like for example, the Benris, right? I have here the 34. I'm getting ready to do some content on the 34, and I think going away from the 39 was kind of a mistake, like personally.
It's
But
I've been wearing that 39 millimeter Benris. Like we were fortunate enough to buy a bunch last month, and as soon as it came in, I called the warehouse and I'm like, "Hey, can you FedEx me one of those overnight? Because I like simple watches and I like purist tool watches a lot of the time, and I like dress watches. But like when day to day, I like a 3-hand, very simple, and I'm like, this hits a lot of boxes. Let me rock it." But the sizes are coming a lot down. There is still people in the US that like that 44 plus, but I think the sweet spot right now is like 38 to 41 millimeters.
I agree. And I was telling my buddy, so like I had just worked on a project in New York and we shot like a short film. I'm gonna send you the link later about a watch influencer. And anyways, I was texting my director because obviously like I wanted to get Christmas presents for everybody who worked on the production. And I was texting him and I was like, hey, like, what, I didn't know what to get him, but then I was getting ready to spin the wheel. And then because I was like, I need to get myself something cool, and then after having the 34 BTU, which I think is too small for me, and then I didn't for whatever reason spin the wheel. And then next thing you know, you send out the Benris to Omega update. And then I texted him and I was like, "Oh, well, I ordered 2 of these things, and then there might be a Speedy in there, like who knows, right?"
Really
And
good
then
odds. There's like
I
1 in 199 got the guy who won the Speedmaster was his first time purchasing on WatchGang too, which is just like, and I'm like, oh, that's wild, man. That's super cool. Next in a couple of weeks, I'm actually going to do a Rolex Explorer 1 with another type of style of that drop mentality. I think it's like one of the biggest things that I want to do is be very transparent so that people can see what they can win and what the odds are. And so they're like, yeah, that's not bad. You get a really good watch, great value, you enjoy it at a good price, and a chance to win an Omega, right?
yeah. Well, because I was working on that content, my friend had the 39, and I was like, I reached out to him and I was like, "Hey man, like, will you send me your 39?" He's like, "Yeah, I got you." But then I saw it on the wheel. I was like, "Oh, I think I can get this for like $350 or something, like whatever it was, right?" And then it dropped. He was gonna sell me his for 200, and I was like, I just bought it. I was like, I don't want to be like a douchebag, but like I told him, I was like, yeah, like just FYI, like I'd love to help you move yours on, but I just paid like 165 for this, 169 or 170 or whatever it was, like with shipping, I was like, man, freaking crazy. Um,
Look, when I see a good deal, I pass it on to my guys, you know? Like that's something like one nice thing about WatchGang is we do buy a lot of watches and we get some interesting opportunities. And I think it's best for me to always pass whatever we get on to the community so that they get to really enjoy watches. Because the more watches is the better in everyone's life, I think.
It's a refreshing perspective because, you know, I guess maybe it's just me, but I've seen the greed side of it as well, where you see, you know, people who are, you know, getting something at retail and then, you know, like imagine a guy who was lucky enough to get a Tiffany Paddock or something and then, you know, go and sell it for like 6 figures, you know. You just see so much greed. And now, especially with watch brands for the past like 4 or 5 years, every single year, all they've been doing is increasing prices, increasing prices, increasing prices. And you're not getting any different of a product. You know, you're getting the same product you did 5 years ago, but it, you know, what does a Speedy cost? Like $9,000 now, like $9,800 is freaking insane. It's ridiculous.
I think the Sapphire is like $9,200 right now. I'm actually wearing a Speedy.
I noticed that.
Yeah, but to me, the Speedmaster was the best watch when it was like $6,300. And that would be like the watch. If anyone was like, hey, I really want to buy my first luxury watch, you know, what should I buy? I'm like Speedmaster. Don't even look at anything else. Speedmaster is the way to go. And now, yeah, $9,200. That's an expensive watch, right? That's you know, that's a lot of other watches that people could get into and collect. Obviously, to me, I think Omega is one of the top 5 brands that you should, as a collector, it should be probably one of your first 3 watches if you're buying a luxury watch. But yeah, the tariffs and the price increases have gone out of control this year, right? I think there was price increases in May, September, and I think there was a few that did in October as well. One who didn't do price increases, maybe because they're already expensive, is Rolex. They held down with their prices, which is a testimony to them saying like, okay, look, this is everyone's problem, but it doesn't have to be our customer's problem right now, right?
Yeah. I was curious I also read an article from the Breitling CEO, George Kern, about how he essentially had started like bringing product into the United States to kind of get ahead of it as well, which was quite an interesting discussion and thought piece because he was like, look, I took like approximately 2 years of our inventory and diverted it to the United States, you know? So we might start to see like some issues in other parts of the world, like the other markets like China or Asia or wherever, you know, they might see some inventory still, but we had to get all of our resources to the United States as soon as possible to get around these tariffs. So I'm assuming that, you know, you guys have had to done something similar.
When it first got announced, yeah, we shipped a lot of goods first. We wanted to stock heavy, but at the same time, it created a little bit of an opportunity for everyone because now your goods, where in the past you always had to chase a discount on some of our competitors' websites, well, they weren't buying them as cheap. So they couldn't discount it, and the tariffs were there. So it made the even playing ground for a lot of people.
Yeah, you're also starting to see brands do weird things where, like, you know, for the past decade or more, they've been discounting their product, and then now all of a sudden they're like digging their feet in the sand, saying no discounts.
You know, and the whole discount thing is a very interesting conversation with me. And I work with a lot of brands who sell full retail and they do phenomenal. Or I've even done a lot of consulting with some hot brands like, you know, like Furlan Marie. You know, in the beginning, I was one of the people who mentored and helped Andrea through that whole process. And, I was want to convince him to do a Mecca quartz. And I'm like, treat it like a paddock.
Wow.
Make it like a Mecca quartz. Make it affordable. Like, everyone wants a paddock, but who's got the money?
Yeah.
So it's whatever the mentality is for that customer. I think that there's a price that people are willing to pay for every product. Sometimes they overinflate the MSRP and people don't want to pay that. They don't see the value in paying that. And other times they go, that price makes sense. I don't need a discount because I'm happy with what I'm getting at that price.
And that's where the greed comes in, because you have brands that look at, like, I don't know what it is, but they're like, oh, well, this brand is selling a chronograph for 10 grand. I can sell a chronograph for 10 grand. Or like, I mean, it's like a toxic mentality, I think.
Oh, especially if you're like me, who I go right down to the manufacturing level. I can't go like, I don't know about that. Like, that's quite the heavy price tag you got on the Salida SW200 for $4,000. But look, everyone has their own business and their own way of running it. My job is just to get watches out to the people in the best way I can with the best value for those customers.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to see what you do here. Now knowing you, like, personally, I could just say, hey man, you're kind of fucking up here. If I could probably say that to you, I would hope.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen that yet. And yeah, I think now I've been more interested in WatchGang, particularly within the past couple years, more so than I was like in the early days. But I definitely can't wait to see, what now. It sounds like you have, and I could be wrong, but it sounds like you have more autonomy now to kind of like do what it is that you want, and to meet the collectors at like a halfway point.
And that's what it is, right? I am very passionate and I'm a collector first. So I want to make it for the people in that way. And we really have the autonomy now in the team. And a lot of the people who surround me are also very passionate about this hobby. So they're wanting to do the best that we can for our customers all the time.
I just love to hear that, I love to hear that, because, when I talk to brands, it seems like they also have a really challenging time, because they're sitting, in Switzerland trying to make decisions in Switzerland about American customers who they have no direct communications to necessarily. There's a lot that gets lost in translation, right? So I have also had these discussions with watch brands about like, hey, like, here's what you need to fix. Like, hey, here's what the customer wants. Here's what the American consumers are looking for. Like, here's the price segment that they're comfortable within. And, you're starting to see some brands listen, which I think is probably the most exciting thing, because, as a collector, there's got to be kind of somebody who's, willing to kind of go to bat for the community. And I, as far as a journalist goes, a content creator, whatever the hell you want to call me, there's not too many people out there, and something that I have always been conscious about focusing on is creating content that collectors consume. Because if you go to any other, outlet, everybody's talking about release after release after release after release after it's never conversations about like, what's the best value, or like, how do you build a relationship with, a watch dealer, or like, what dealers are worth looking at, or like, once you have a watch, like, what do you look for in a watchmaker? Like, how do you decide that this is going to be the right type of watchmaker, or how do you buy a watch from the gray market, or how do you decide if you want to buy it from retail? Like, all these weird, questions that people always get confused about. Like, nobody's really talking about that shit, and that's why I was like, I kind of want to do something, and that's, the podcast you're on, that's this, right?
Awesome.
And yeah, I can't wait to see what you do. But what I've also found too is a lot of our listeners are not only the watch brands, but they're collectors and they're entrepreneurs and they're creatives, so Um, Curious to give, some of your insight on leadership, like every single CEO, everybody who runs a business has said some of those hard lessons. If you would be willing to share some of those hard lessons that you've learned and how you've overcame them, I think people would find a ton of value in that.
There's been so many hard lessons. I took over when WatchGang was not in their best moment, and it wasn't a choice that I took over the company. I was kind of like the last man standing that had the guts to say yes. But I saw the value in what it is and who the team and what the people there were doing. And I think in a leadership role, it's letting your juniors and people be creative and open, but it's really about building that stabilized team that we're all in it together and we're all kind of equals in that role of growing. We now are very, very fortunate that it's almost like a family. My brother is the COO, so it is a family in that sense, but it's a place where we are all having one goal and that we're kind of moving forward together to make the best experience for our customers and our members at WatchGang.
Something to this, obviously, like, this industry is there is some toxicity in the industry. And, I have tried my hardest to avoid it. I think most of us have, as not only as a collector, but as a content creator, journalist, whatever. So curious as to how you stay so sharp and focused and what keeps you motivated, especially during some of those toxic, tough times.
A lot of cocktail hours and beers at the events. No, I think it's that we try to stay out of any of the politics or any of the toxicity of that relationship. We're there just to buy watches, get them on people's wrists, and we don't really play in the role of a lot of the media aspect of the watch industry yet. That is one of the things that we're looking to do in the next year is to make a section on our page for content creation, or really to not do the content creation ourselves, but allow independent people a place where they can post and be into a bigger, grander community. My brother used to do online betting, and there was a lot of, they're not forums, but there'd be like, yeah, if you're a content creator and your content is great, let's distribute it onto our website because it's giving you clout and it's giving us things that we need too, right? It's a voice, right? It's an independent voice, I'd say, right? Versus a lot of the creators and people out there are very isolated into their own box almost, right?
That's something too that I as a creator has struggled with for so long, to keep that independence, right? Like, there's so many people out there that talk about watches and they have great content, but they also sell watches, And to me, I think a lot about like the early days of like Mad Men, right? Where they're developing the whole first season. They're talking about like how they develop like the whole campaigns for the tobacco industry. And they're like, oh, well, they eventually come that like smoking is cool, man. Like, let's make it look cool, but then, they have the scientists that are like saying smoking is, well, who says we have to talk about what the scientists are saying? Let's just focus on it being cool, and that's something that like I've struggled with, because, keeping your independence is really challenging, right? Like it takes money to do this, right? To sit here to make content, camera equipment is not cheap, lenses, lights, all that shit is expensive. And brands, they want to persuade people the best way that they can, obviously I have brands and stuff that I gravitate towards, but how can I remain anonymous, or how can I retain my independence without having any type of brand influence, that sways me. And, I think the reality is that it's going to be really hard to have that because you like Omega, right? Like I like Zenith, right? I think we both like, those are both great brands, but like, the king of chronographs to me is Zenith, or some people think Breitling, or some people think Omega, or some people think Rolex, like, so you're going to have that initial bias on like what it is that you prefer. right? And that's just the way that I take it. I'm like, hey, look, this is my opinion. Here it is. Like, I'm not taking money from brands. Brands aren't paying me. Like, I'm doing this for fun. Da 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 da. Like, and it always becomes that challenge of keeping that autonomy. And so, as somebody who creates content, I could totally see a place for something like that, right? Giving people the means to push their content out there without having to rely. And there's a lot of even content creators out there right now who like don't even know how to gain access to product, and that's something that luckily I didn't have too many issues with, but that's how you keep these great channels alive, by giving them access to the products, which would be freaking amazing.
Yeah. And it's also, we need the people like you who are going to go out and do proper content, create things, and have opinions. Because you're right, not everyone likes the same things. And when it's a always paid review, paid thing, it's very hard to have a non-biased opinion to that product, right? And that's one of the really challenges. Or if you're selling it, selling it's great, but in reality, you're not gonna be saying truly maybe what you feel or think, or I like that's where I think it's a little bit more fun for me, because I can say I don't like something, or I can say I really like something, and I don't have any affiliation besides Laco, because we are their U.S. distributor, so I have to always say good things about Laco.
Well, Laco's a great brand too, and they're a brand that I've actually worked with directly as well. Like if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see I did actually a buyer's guide, right? And this is like getting into the collector sphere, like where we talk about their Pilot's Watch Basic, going into their Pilot's Watch Original, and then going all the way up to the Flieger Pro. Like which one is for who? Because especially if you go through the Laco website, I mean, they have a million freaking models. They have a million freaking different sizes. Like you can get an original, and then you can upgrade the movement, and then like you can put the crown on the other side, and like you can do all this freaking crazy shit, and that's great for the consumer, but it also puts them in like a paralysis decision, I think.
I think that's. I think that so when we talk about Pilot Pros, I've had about 7 Pilot Pros, and I've built them in 7 different ways. And somehow, I have a weird thing that if it's a watch of not much like huge financial value, and if one of my friends or somebody around me is like, "Hey, that's really cool," I give it to them. I find that every time I give away a watch, somehow another one ends up back in my life. So it's kind of like a karma thing, but it's insane the amount of options and this and this and this and that. But it makes it somebody to go, ooh, what do I want?
Yeah, it gives the decision back to the consumer, which I absolutely love. And yeah, I mean, dude, I think I took maybe like 6 hours or so, or like just trying to build mine out. I know, like, an incredible waste of time, but I want to make sure I got it right, and I think that's what a lot of collectors are so concerned about, like getting their collecting journey done the right way, whatever the hell that means. There is no right way, but if you're spending money, you want to know that what you're spending money on is worth it at the end of the day, and I just wanted to get it right. So I spent like 6 hours, if not, I don't even know, maybe more, like going through it. I'm like, well, do I get the AR on both sides? Do I get the case back? I can get the COSC movement or the chronometer movement or whatever, like, and then I just keep the case back closed, and then I don't decorate it, like, and I can get a better movement for the same money. And it's like, Jesus Christ, you know what I mean? Like, I just had this weird.
The nice thing about watches, though, is you can always go on to like WatchGang's exchange or other exchange and trade within the community. So you're not stuck with them for life necessarily. But there are people who keep every watch that they've ever purchased. Me, I probably have about 3 watches that I've had from the beginning. And it's just an always changing, revolving door what's going on my wrist.
I've tried to take that approach, and now I had at one point almost 150 watches, and now I have about 60. So I have been purging. But like, I was sitting down with one of my friends and there's brands that I gravitate towards. Like I have like 6 Omegas. Like I will never not have under 6 Omega. I just can't get rid of what I have. I love them, you know. And same thing for Zenith. Like I just cannot not get rid of my Zeniths, or Cartier is another brand, that I absolutely love, or IWC. I can't figure out how I can start to get rid of some of these. Doxa is another brand that I'm absolutely obsessed with. I'm getting ready to add another Doxa to my collection, like in the coming weeks, and it's so hard, man. It's so hard. So I wish I could look at it in the same way that you do, just, hey, these are things, they're going to be loved by somebody else if I'm not loving them,
It's funny you said IWC. I've never owned an IWC.
Oh yeah.
I probably should. I always wanted the one that they did with Lewis Hamilton in the Mojave with the annual calendar. That's like, if I was going to get an IWC, that's the one I would probably get. But we'll get to that bridge when I find it one day. But yeah, it's my interest change, so my collection changes is the way I kind of look at it, right? And it's, as long as it's something that it could be replaced in my lifetime, or if it's a vintage watch, which vintage watches are really where I'm really, really passionate about, I got to enjoy something for a period of time. I had a 8171 Paddle Rose Gold, and I had it for about 2 years. And I think I wore it about 2 times in 2 years. And it was because I was terrified of wearing it. But I was like, you know what? I got in that lifetime of that watch, which is a 70-year-old watch now. I got to own a little piece of that history, and it's had a really cool life along the way. So it's like I'm passing it on to its next journey. That's the way I can, part ways with things, I guess.
That's a cool perspective, because right now, like I have one or 2 Omegas that like I don't even know how I could ever get rid of. One of them is the first of 1,000 made of the Omega Speedmaster Mark II from the 70s. Freaking insane, right? I sent it off to Omega. I paid like $2,000 for them to restore it, like way too much, but it looks freaking amazing. And then the second one is the Seamaster Soccer. Not a lot of people know about the Seamaster Soccer, but that is an incredible piece, and I don't wear it, but same thing. I sent it back to Omega. They restored it, like, and I don't know if I could ever get rid of it. Maybe I'm just being selfish.
You know what? There'll be a time and a place where you'd be like, you know what? Now it's time to continue on its journey, right?
Yeah,
and
maybe so.
Omega is an insane brand because everyone always thinks about Seamasters and Speedmasters. But then when you actually get really into Omega and see all the wild stuff that they did in the 70s and 80s, and then even through the 90s, it's like, wow, they did some incredible things and made some really cool designs and different watches. So
their collection is insane. I mean, especially if you look at the funky stuff from the 70s. And I'm going through a phase right now where I'm getting into vintage Zeniths, which is just going to be the death of me,
That's a scary one. I've gone down that rabbit hole before.
You're gonna have to see. So like whenever we link up next, maybe sometime in the next couple of weeks or maybe after the holidays, I have a vintage Zenith that's at Zenith right now, and I think maybe 2 or 3 episodes back, if you're curious, we had the head of heritage for Zenith on the podcast, and we had like a nerdy freaking like 2-hour like mega podcast where we just went on like the weirdest things that she's found in the archives. And then, I mean, I wasn't even planning to talk about, something that I've also been working on is I've been buying these vintage watches and sending them back to the brands, and documenting the process of like, hey, what it's like to like, here's what it's like to own this watch, and here's how the brands treat you. And I've done that with Omega. I've done it with Bulgari. I've done it with Cartier. I've done it with a bunch of brands, and people, that needs to be shared. Like, what is it like to own this watch, you know? And yeah, so more content that I'm also working on. Final question, you know, I want to let you get back to work. If you were to start WatchGang over in 2025, knowing what you know now, how would you have started it differently, or what would you have done differently?
It would have been a lot more content driven, and focused on making the hobby of watch collecting exciting and fun. WatchGang's direction is about games, and it would be more game driven. And to me, I think it's like content and create content is something that people love forever, and they come back and always review it again and again and again. So that's probably what I would have done differently.
I mean, amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you for spending, you know, just over an hour with us. Can't wait for this to go out. And also I can't wait to see you once you get back from your trip. So
Awesome. Thank you very much, Blake.
thanks, Chad. Talk to you soon, buddy.
Bye.